These are my lovely flower baskets that I pulled down from their hangers because up there in their hangers on the south side of the building, they get really hot. So they've suffered a little bit from the heat, but they're really lovely. And I've got some sweet pea that doesn't have anything to vine to because these little metal chains that hold the basket up, bug, bug alert, these little metal chains get very hot. So on this one, I found this little ladybug thing that you poke in. So it has already attached itself firmly to that and it's very happy. This one, not so much. And I have alyssum in here. My neighbor lady brought me, when she saw me out like potting things up, she brought me a packet of alyssum seed and said, I don't grow things, so you can have these. So I sprinkled them around into some pots, and here's what came up from seed here, and there's some here. But they also have had a little, struggle with the intense heat of some of these hot summer days. So what I'm going to do is just trim this up a little bit. I'm planning on going on vacation, and so I thought if I trimmed these back a little bit and give some new growth a chance, and then I will put the baskets in a less hot spot when I leave on vacation. And I've taken them off of their hangers and put them around on the east side where they still get lots of sun, but not the burning hot afternoon sun. So you're probably wondering no, you're not probably wondering, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I recently realized that I'm old. I'm not getting old. I'm already there. So as soon as you realize that, you're like, I need a bucket list. So I started thinking about, what I would have on my bucket list. And I'm like, man, that would take a young person a lifetime. So uh, I thought about writing my memoirs, but I went back to my 50-year class reunion last year. This is probably when I actually realized, yeah, you're old, because people that go to 50-year class reunions over my entire lifetime, anybody I knew that went to a 50-year class reunion was old. So, I mean, they said 50, 50 is the new 30. That's what we were all saying to each other when we turned 50. But, uh, 69 is 69. And even if you're like in pretty good shape, there's still only gonna be, I mean, that light at the end of the tunnel, folks, is the ancestors beckoning. Come towards the light, come towards the light. So, as far as the future goes, well, that's what that is. And I just have the here and now. So I thought, well, I better get after this bucket list. But it was so long and so extensive. And then I thought about writing my memoirs, right? Well, once you start going down memory lane, you realize it's strewn with a lot of brambles, especially when you're me. And so I thought, well, I'll do a video thing because I did video back when video was just getting cool. So I thought I'll do, since we have America's 250th birthday in 2026, the golden age, and me being old in my golden age, I'll just launch a series of Sky Country Journal called the Golden Age Tour, and I'll visit all 56 of Montana's counties over the course of 2 years. In the meantime, I will build out a website with a page for each of Montana's 56 counties, and I will put video stories, and I'll put events and businesses and local producers, and make it really content rich, and put up videos from each county as I visit them. So that's what I started to do. Well, I'm just a one-man show. So first I started using Claude and then Grok. Anyway, it's a work in progress, kids. And it was incumbent on me to do some kind of a, hi, who am I video. Why am I not giving you life advice? Because I'm like that Berenstain Bear movie. I mean, the book that I used to read to the kids. And Papa Bear, like, he was trying to teach his children safety rules, but then he did everything dangerously and he always ended up wrecking. And it's like, this is how you don't do it. He always put up his little furry little clawed finger. Don't do it this way, kids. So that's me. I'm like Papa Bear. Don't do what I did. But I will say, even though I did things the way I did, I always seem to escape, not without a few bumps and bruises. But I have spent most of my adult life as a single person. I raised a lot of children, and they are all just, they're better people than I ever even dreamed of being. So that's pretty exciting. And so my plan is to just take you along as I work out my bucket list during the golden age. And I'm going to stay in the state of Montana for the most part, although I do have some forays into the region. And I'll take you along and we can talk about life, we can talk about stuff. Okay. So I'm sure my kids wondered, why didn't grandma stay married? And, you know, the kids that never even thought about the question, maybe after I'm gone, they'll be like, what happened? So I'll kind of tell you, and that way you'll know. My first husband was a world champion bull rider, a professional CRCA world champion, and he was much older than me, 19 years older. And I met him when I was 16 or 17, I think. Some of my classmates and I started a rodeo club, a high school rodeo club, because there was not a rodeo club in my hometown, not a high school rodeo club. Although there was an annual youth rodeo, but there wasn't a high school club. So we started a club, and one of the first things we did was we split up. We thought about people in the community that we knew that were loved rodeo or were involved somehow in rodeo and would support high school rodeo team. And on my list was the bull rider named Ronnie Rawson. He was a professional bull rider, and he lived with his family across the river from the place where we were ranching. And I knew him, and I knew his kids, and I said, I'll contact Ronnie Rawson and see if he'll support us. So I did, and of course Ronnie was all over it, and he was all over me. Anyway, so he was sort of always there when I was in my last year or two of high school. And then, like the day after high school graduation, my girlfriend and I put all of our precious belongings into our vehicles. I had a 1969 Oldsmobile Tornado, you know, with the headlights that go down into the hood. It was forest green with kind of a beigeish leather top, and it was a sweet car. Anyway, I bought it just by working at the Tasty Freeze and the Cool Retreat since about the age of 14. Plus, we had animals in 4-H, and we sold our animals in the fall. And mostly those we reinvested into more animals, but I worked and I bought myself a car, and I fishtailed out of that one horse town because I was no way I was getting stuck out on a ranch on a sagebrush covered hillside in southeastern Montana for the rest of my life. So that was the day after high school graduation, and I went all the way 90 miles to the next town over and started looking for a job and an apartment. My girlfriend and I were doing it together. We each had our own vehicles and sort of our own paths, but we were going to live together. And like the first person we meet as we're walking down the street of Miles City, Montana, was Ronnie Rawson, the guy that had been, you know, kind of sparking on me since I was 16 years old. So, of course, we told him what we were up to. And I mean, he was all over it, right? He was like on the phone, or not, we didn't have cell phones back in the day, but he was on the payphone in the restaurant there and calling people he knew. And before you knew it, he said, I've got a place for you. And it was in the basement of an old folks, you know, a couple of old folks, and they had converted their basement into a little apartment. And so we had our own entrance and everything, but the old folks lived above us, which I think Ronnie thought was perfect. And we thought it was okay. It was kind of hard not to go along with him. And so then he was just there, and he would come to my work, which initially was at a place called the Crossroads Inn, and it was the most interesting place, and I'll tell you all about it someday. But it was a dance hall. It was a dinner club. It was a steakhouse with a bar inside, and then a dance floor, and then the steakhouse was, kind of in the middle. So when you went there for steak, you also went dancing to the live music and, had a drink at the bar. Well, Ronnie was more the have a drink at the bar guy, so he would show up and have a drink at the bar and wait for me to get off. And there he'd be, out in the parking lot. And he was kind of hard to ditch. I really tried. I told him, I know your kids. I well, it's not just you and I that are involved here. I told him all this stuff. I really tried to get rid of the guy, and eventually he did leave. He went down to Denver, and so here I was. By this time, I lived by myself. Um, and Ronnie had kind of alienated me from my friends because he basically stayed with me when he was around. And I could tell you another story. I'll tell you another story someday about a guy named Butch, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, I'm kind of telling you the story of Ronnie Rawson today. Um, Eventually, he went down south, but he called me every day. You know what I mean? He just never really let me go. And of course, I missed him. We had a lot of fun together, and he was who he was, and that was kind of flattering. And I was all up 19 years old. I was all about adventure, and I wasn't really. By this time, I had a job at a bank. I was a teller at a bank, and I just wasn't really into just being a teller at a bank any more than I was into being, the ranch wife of a rancher out on the lone prairie. So he called me up one day and he said, I'm at this I'm at the racetrack, Santa Anita, or was it Santa Ana? I'll have to look it up. The racetrack that was in Littleton, Colorado. He said, I've got a job here ponying horses, and there's all kinds of work here. You can come in and work in the stalls, and um, we'll just hang out here. I've got a place for us to live, yada, yada. And I think I might have turned 20. No, I just turned 19. And so I quit my job at the bank and I moved out of my apartment and I put my things in my 1969 Oldsmobile Tornado and I took off and went to Denver, Colorado and met up with him. And then so life went from there. And we did a lot of fun things and we traveled together and went to rodeos and worked and various different things I could tell you about sometime. But how did I get knocked up? Okay, we were very progressive. We had the pill. And so we were in Denver and I needed to see a doctor and I told Ronnie I've got to visit a girl doc because I need more pills, right? So his cousin knew a retired doctor. They were friends, or she had worked for him. I don't know. They were friends, and but he still would see people from time to time if they were in his circle, so to speak. So she calls up this retired OBGYN, and he met me in his office, and he was indeed an old man. And he gave me, he did me an exam and everything, and announced that I was as pretty on the inside as I was on the outside. And then when I left, he gave me a sample, a stack of birth control pills from his little closet. And so I took those for 6 months or however big the stack was. And then I go into a pharmacy to fill the prescription, and the pharmacist looked at it and he said, "Have you been taking this?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you better get a pregnancy test because this has been taken off the market. This didn't work." So I took a pregnancy test, and I passed with flying colors. So that kind of ended my relationship with Ronnie in the form that it was in, because, what good's it, you know? I mean, like, I was one of those, I was just there because I was pretty and I had a fast car. And, I was fun to be around, I'm sure. I was mischievous and fun. And after I got pregnant, of course, I wasn't that much use to him. So I certainly couldn't work with him. We worked in feedlots, and I went home eventually, and uh, well, we went and got married. I went home. He came home and married me, and we set off to live happily ever after as a married couple with a new baby boy. And we even then we had lots of adventures, but we were living in Gillette, Wyoming. No. We were living in Story, Wyoming, and there was a rich socialite in Story, Wyoming, who had a crush on my husband. You know how that goes. He was a a rodeo cowboy with a lot of schwang. He was very charming, disarmingly charming, my girlfriend said. Anyway, she had him training her horses and this and that. Anyway, he got on a plane for San Antonio. He was going to entered in the bull riding there. And so I got a call a few hours after he left from the nanny of this rich socialite. And she said, "Did you know that Patty got on the plane with Ronnie?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that." And so I drove to the airport in Sheridan. And sure enough, there was her long white, pearly white Cadillac. And she'd left in such a hurry that her door was left wide open. Anyway, so that one was easy to get out of. I just packed up my baby and my things while the two of them were off to a rodeo in San Antonio, and I went home to the ranch. And so that's where I had that's, you know, where I had my next baby, because that's where I had both babies. But yeah, my next baby, I was a couple months pregnant when I left Ronnie, because he kept saying, "I'm going to get a vasectomy. You're too young to get your tubes tied, but I don't want more children, so I'm going to get the big snip." Well, yeah, he didn't. And within a very short period of time after my first baby was born, I was pregnant again. And the condom thing didn't work. There was no birth control known to man that could overcome my ancestral genes. I mean, my great grandmother had 11 children, right? So that was kind of the saga of, that's how I got married twice, is because I was knocked up. And then the third time I got married, well, my second husband, it's no secret, tried to rearrange my face. And so I sort of had to flee, right? And first I fled to a battered women's shelter on the other side of the state. And later on, my little brother came and he lived out in Virginia, having already fled a violent relationship. And um, so he comes to Casper, where I was living at the time. No, it wasn't Casper, it was Helena, Montana. And he comes and gets me and three of my four children, my three youngest children, and we go all the way to Chesapeake Bay. I mean, if we'd have gotten any further, we'd have had to start swimming. Anyway, so that's kind of how I got out of my second marriage. It wasn't that easy because basically he wanted to put my lights out. And then my third marriage, um, after my dad died, an old friend of mine, the guy I said I'll tell you more about him later, his name is Butch. My dad well, I could tell you, I'm not going to tell you about Butch. All I can say is Butch helped get me out of my second marriage with my lights still on. And he kind of put me back together as a person. And then he went on his way, and I went on mine. And I still call him my favorite husband, Sam. Even though his name was Butch, I called him Sam. So my favorite husband, Sam, was my third and final foray into the world of marriage. And if you add them all up, I've been single for the majority of my adult life. My last marriage ended probably more than 25 years ago, because I actually, it was in the late 90s. And so I've been single for a long, long time. And probably why I look at the camera and just talk to myself. But I'm really just talking to you because if you tuned in here, maybe you're interested, or maybe you knew me, or maybe if we're sometime in the future, you're someone that maybe was related to me somehow. And the fact is, I love you. And since you can't be here with me now, this is the next best thing. So I'll see you again soon, babies. Bye.